Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. Jason's engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. We will not be taking any calls today. If you call, I'm sorry, we will not be able to take your calls. Captain John Ragan's with us, and he has a wealth of information to share with you. If you'd like to follow along in class, you can go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. And before I introduce Captain John to the front of the classroom, I'd like to just share some thoughts about today's class with you. I believe that this broadcast class with Captain John Ragan, U.S. Air Force Reserves retired, will be the most important broadcast we have ever done. If you stay with us, you'll have information to better survive here on planet Earth. What you will hear during this 2-hour special will shake you to your core. It will inform you so that you can make the choice between us and the GDP. The GDP is leading us to slaughter. An analogy might be in the mid-1800s here in North America, the U.S. government deliberately and willfully slaughtered American Indians. The Americans stole Indian land and murdered Indians to get it. The American government slaughtered the Indians because of two things. They were able to do it because they had wheels and they had bearings, of which the Indians had neither. With wheels, the Army brought rifles, revolvers, shotguns, ammunition, men, food, and supplies to the Midwest. The Indians on their homeland had to drag their supplies around with saplings tied to horses, and the end of the saplings would wear out as they dragged along the ground. Wheels and bearings versus saplings. Wheels and bearings allowed forging of barrels, manufacturing of ammunition, the ability to make things like cannons and bring them to the battlefield. There's no way the American Indians could drag cannons to the battlefield using saplings and horses. The Chinese are taking down the United States of America. They make the bearings and the wheels. All the while, we are watching sports and programming like Ellen DeGenerate and infect ourselves at campaign rallies. The dumbest possible thing we could do on the planet. Part 1 today, we'll be talking about teeth, root canals, as a request from one of our USA Prepare students. Part 2 is the coronavirus and the corona panic. Months ago, this is the part that's going to get me in trouble. Months ago, and it's okay. Months ago, I was told by a well-known broadcaster that this corona thing will blow over in 3 weeks. I wanted to come on the air with you and tell you what my thoughts were about what to do about the supply chain, what you needed to get, the burn rate that you would experience, and what to have on hand immediately while it was still available. I was not allowed to do that. I was not allowed to be on the air on another network and warn you. That's the network that's a talk radio network, and you will hear that the coronavirus is a fake and it's BS, to use their terms. This broadcast may end my relationship with that network. I am not referring to Genesis Communications Network. I'm referring to another network. You'll have to be the judge of whether what we're doing is worth the risk that we are taking today to warn you about how serious this is. Part 1 will be about root canals. Part 2 will be about the coronavirus update, the ensuing corona panic, and how absolutely, positively serious it is. I have not changed my tune. I have not changed my message one iota since day one. And I don't know who else, other than John Ragan, there are not many people who have not changed their tune. The two of us are steadfast in this. And I'm proud to call Captain John Ragan my friend. He will wipe that smile right off your face today. If you choose to stay with us, your chances of survival would be greatly improved. Captain John Ragan, welcome. I'm sorry that this is such a serious note, but it is.
Now, there's things that we've been talking about for years. The virus has added a new spin on it, but it doesn't really change anything. The virus is just the pin that popped the bubble and has given us some additional things to have to deal with. This is probably the saddest show I've ever put together. And I guess let's just go ahead and start off about root canals. Dentists love to do root canals. It's basically after they've done everything else they can do to the tooth, they want to hollow it out and, just leave it there. And if you're following along online, I start out today to saying, Dr. Tennant is turning 80. That's going to be this weekend. And because of that, his book, Healing His Voltage, the Handbook, 3rd edition, which is my reference for this part, is going to be on sale for half off until July 1st, so you can grab it for just $15. This is like a 550-page book of things that you wish your doctor and dentist knew about. So on page 422, he goes in to explain how everybody knows if you leave dead tissue in the body, it always gets infected. Now, that's like when you have an appendix rupture, they have to take it out. But dentists, for some reason, leave dead tissue in the body in the form of teeth that have had root canals. And the short answer I can probably give, what action would you take if you learned that the dentist that invented root canals spent the remainder of his career trying to get dentists to stop doing root canals? And does that sound like it's a procedure you want to take? Now, to get more into okay, as a tooth gets infected, if it's infected with bacteria, they produce a toxin called bioethers. It's called by fungus, it's gliotoxins. And when you look at the effect on the body, one root canal shuts down about 63% of your immune system. Does that sound like a good thing to you? So, when I learned that, I had already had 3 root canals, and the only thing I could do is have those teeth removed. They were all 3 in a row, so I got an appliance to stick in the space. If you want to try and replace it, you'll want to look at implants that have zirconia bases, because if you use the metal bases, that cause voltage problems, which we could spend so much time. So I highly recommend the book where you can learn everything. So if somebody asked me, would I get a root canal? No. In fact, I had another tooth that had an infection underneath it. They wanted to do a root canal and just told them, pull it. So I'm missing 4 teeth now. But, it's for my health. And even when a tooth is removed, you need to make sure that the dentist gets all the little pieces from the base, because sometimes little pieces break off. And one of the things I learned a couple of years ago going to a live presentation by Dr. Tennant is that, when you get your root canal teeth, your wisdom teeth out, for me that was in high school, there can be pieces in there that over the years the infection spreads, and if you want to try and do something with that, you need to find a dentist that has a cavitron. That's the way you detect it. And you'd have to go in there and clean it out, but in the meantime, that infection is spreading and taking down your immune system. If you wonder why you get sicker as you get older, that can be one of the reasons. Vincent?
John, as you're saying this, I was thinking about back to chemistry. We even know this on the farm. Heck, if you take any 2 dissimilar metals and you put an electrolyte between them, you will create a cell. Multiple cells would be called a battery. So the misuse of the term battery would be the word cell in many instances. So if you take an iron rod and an aluminum rod and you pound it into the ground, let's say a few feet apart, and you sprinkle some water on there, like with a garden hose, you'll be able to measure a voltage. Literally. If you take 2 dissimilar metals and you take a piece of, let's say, a dime and a penny, and you take a piece of paper towel, you put some saline solution on that, and you have a sandwich of the dime, the paper towel with saline solution, and the penny, you'll be able to measure a voltage. In your mouth, you may have gold and silver and mercury fillings. Those are 3 dissimilar metals. The saliva is the electrolyte. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us, U.S. Air Force Reserves, retired. And if you'd like to follow along in class today, you can go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. And I suggest that you do that. And I suggest that you forward the link to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com to all of your friends whom you think would like to survive what we're facing. It is that important. It's all right there. If you want to know what is happening with today's class, the topics, the voltages caused in your mouth, the damage that it can do to your immune system, and the coronavirus and the ensuing corona panic, if you want to better survive that, all you have to do is go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com and send that link to all of your friends and say, here it is. It's all in one place. All you have to do is read it. And if you do, you probably will change your behavior immediately as soon as you wipe that smile off your face. Captain John?
I know some people just can't afford $15 for a book. You can go to YouTube and search for Dr. Jerry Tennant, Tennant, or search for Healing is Voltage, and you'll find some of his presentations. Dr. Tennant doesn't have a lot of videos on his channel, but a couple of them, it's part 1, part 2, Tennant Minute, Tyler, Texas. And those two videos together take a little bit over an hour, and that will cover a lot of what is in the book. So just wanted to pass that out. And also wanted to say, when I went in to see Dr. Tennant and he did the test, he takes a meter and sees how much voltage is leaking from fillings and crowns that have metallic bases. And I took that list and added it up together, and I was leaking a full volt, which for a biological system is quite a bit. And I didn't have really any follow-up with him. He sent me to the dentist to get all that work done. And it's sad, that dentists don't know more of this current knowledge. They don't realize what they're doing to people. And, of course, the same thing is true of most doctors. They don't understand the gut microbiome. They know little about the effect of fructose on your immune system and how that causes all kinds of issues with the body, which actually gets into what the virus is doing to us, because it's all about inflammation. So I know we're going to be running up to a break here. I've got just a few financial things I want to cover before we get into the virus part. Big one, Social Security cuts this decade. How many times have I said over the years, especially with the news in the mainstream, they're saying mid-2030s, they're going to have to cut Social Security about 22% because the trust funds will be exhausted. And I talked about how there's ways that could happen quicker, and that neither the trustee model or the CBO model that Professor Kotlikoff uses accounted for a recession. And I make the case this is really more than a recession, but just counting it as a recession, it's a big deal. And the first link in that section is from the Bipartisan Policy Center. It's a think tank in D.C., and they crunch the numbers and basically say if this recession is like the Great Recession, now that exhausts the trust fund in 2028. And we'll finish this off when we get back.
Captain John Ragan, I just want to tell our class we're not kidding. This is the real deal. We are absolutely serious as a heart attack. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us, and just a couple quick comments. Bottom of the hour news, you just probably heard that AAA expects a 15% decline in road traffic due to the corona panic. 15% decline. That kind of shows you who the GDP really are. There really should be about a 90% decline in road traffic. Next comment, a battery is a sum of cells. So you take a car battery, and it has 6 cells in that plastic box. And each cell has a vent. They may be covered up with tape, or they may be exposed. But each one of those cells is 2.1 volts. You take all those 2.1 volt cells, all 6 of them, and you multiply that out, and you'll get a little more than 12 volts. That's what's called a 12-volt battery. Captain John was saying that he had a leakage or a current generation in his mouth that was artificially installed there mechanically by dentists over the years, such that if you added each one of those cells, which would be a filling and another filling, with a sandwich of saliva, that would be one cell. Add up all the cells with all the fillings in his mouth, and it equaled 1 volt. That's what he was talking about. Captain John, please continue.
Okay, I'm on table 1 for that first link on Social Security. And basically it's saying on the baseline, the Social Security reserves were originally slated for depletion in 2034 and disability in 2065. Now, it's got a line for double Great Recession, and I think that might even be optimistic, but let's use that line. That changes the year of Social Security reserve depletion to 2026 and disability to 2022. Now, talk about the factors that you can pay attention to that will have an effect on this. A big one is employment, or specifically unemployment. If people aren't working, then there's no taxes as revenue for the Social Security fund, and that makes that deplete quicker. And I don't know what they factored in for that. They may not have put enough in. Another one is automation. We were already slated to see automation take jobs this decade, and that's probably going to ramp up even more because of the virus, because the robots don't breathe on you and transfer the virus. So, and obviously robots don't pay Social Security taxes either. Another factor here is a lot of these people that are unemployed will never be reemployed, which means there will likely be a lot more people retiring as early as they can, which is age 62, and that is also a drag on the system. Where it can really accelerate is if there's no longer buyers for U.S. Treasury bonds, because the government stole all the money from Social Security and Medicare and put in IOUs. And they have to exchange those IOUs for marketable Treasury securities. So if they can't get people to buy that, then that's going to immediately pull that date forward. Another possible negative factor is if Trump gets his way and has the payroll tax holiday, that means that there are no funds going in to Social Security while he's doing that, which makes the whole situation worse. And there's not very much Congress can do about it. They can change the retirement age to later, which is really going to hurt seniors. They can do things like increase taxes on benefits. There's no real solution. And even as it was, we needed over $200 trillion invested today, earning interest, just to meet the promises of Social Security and Medicare. By the time the year's through, that's probably going to be over $300 trillion. And $200 trillion is more than twice all the fake money in the world. So if you've got a solution on how to pay for that when there's not even enough money in the world, I'd like to hear about it. Okay, try and rush along here. So much to get to. Advertising in the CV age. Media was already suffering before this hit, and there's only been a few areas where the spending is positive, and it's still way below what they had had before the outbreak. So the ones that are still positive are social media, online video, online display, and search. Everything else that is negative, and the best of these is a negative 10%. Online classified, television, radio, newspapers, magazines, out of home, and cinema. And it's going to get real interesting because, where we've been getting our news from, whether you use the old mainstream model or the new alternative media model, there's just not the revenue from advertising that there used to be. And you're probably going to see a lot more media outlets go out of business, declaring bankruptcy, the longer this drags on. And I think I'll pause here for Vincent to talk about media.
What do you mean about media?
Your thoughts on the advertising.
What are you asking me to do, John?
I'm just,
Oh, okay. Well, I got to tell you, everything that I've read, advertising is drying up. Absolutely drying up. Everywhere you look, regardless of what you're selling, advertising is drying up. And not only that, businesses, high-end businesses. Tiffany is bankrupt. The very, very high-end fashion stores are closing. They're telling the landlords, we're not going to pay the rent. We can't pay the rent. And the landlords are threatening the stores, saying you will pay the rent. Malls are closing because the anchor stores can't pay the rent because they don't have the traffic, the customers buying things. So this is a spiral, and I've said publicly for a long time now, since the very beginning of the corona announcements, that we're not coming back from this anytime soon. This is going to take decades in order to pull out of it. And I still mean that. So everything is down. All sales are down. And what I'm starting to see is not only that, but goods disappearing from shelves. I believe that companies are selling down their inventory, and their inventory is not being replaced. I'm talking about Chinese things, for example. And it's very, very difficult. It's difficult for manufacturing to continue when they can't get the parts to make the final assemblies. And a lot of the parts come from China. As I mentioned, bearings and wheels come from China. If you have a trailer, let's say it's a utility trailer like we use here on the farm. We've got a 16-foot, and we've got a gooseneck trailer. We can't find new wheels. We have some wheels that are slightly bent, and we'd really like that trailer to pull nicely down the road. There are no wheels available for us to buy that are brand new that fit that trailer. Why? Because they come from, guess where? China. We don't make the wheels. Can you imagine that? If you look at where tires are made, you'll find out they're made in China. So all of this is the corona panic that we've been talking about here on USA Prepares. It's the result of the coronavirus. We are being taken down, and I hit my own button, and I don't want to get off track, but
you can't even
very, very
ramp up manufacturing quickly because you have to build a site, you have to hire people to create the robots for it, and you're kind of stuck in the meantime.
Yeah, and the servos and the hydraulics and the hydraulic pumps and cylinders and seals all come from China anyway. So how are we gonna ramp up when we need parts from China to ramp up. Class, let me just explain it this way. In World War II, we were bombing Germany. We decided that, we would slow them down. And all we had to do, literally, all we had to do was find the bearing factories, the factories that made the ball bearings, the roller bearings, the taper bearings, the sleeve bearings. All we had to do is find them and bomb them. That's all you have to do. Once you do that, everything stops. There's no movement. It's as simple as that. No food gets moved. No fuel gets moved. No machinery gets made. Everything comes to a grinding halt. And that is why I said that the U.S. Army in the mid-1800s defeated the Indians so quickly because the Army had bearings and wheels and the Indians didn't. And we, class, we're the Indians now. We really are. John, did I overstate that?
I don't think so. And you talked about commercial rent. I didn't include it, but, in the housing market, for like 3 months now, we've had 30% of people not being able to pay their rent or mortgage. And that can only go on so long before you got a tsunami going on in the financial system.
Okay, and let's add to that the real unemployment rate. I don't believe anything the government tells us. The numbers that I've been reading, if you look at the number of people employed and the number of people who don't have jobs, the real number is at least 1/3 unemployed. And during the first Great Depression, 1929 through 1945, the unemployment rate was about 25%. It's almost 50% more than that right now. 1/3, at least 1/3. Nobody's working. I mean, they may say they're working from home, but they're not working. Especially the government workers, they're not working. It's play work, make work. It's like keep these people off the street so they don't riot. That's what this is all about. And those payments, that $1,200 and the next big one, that's to keep you from rioting. Class, Captain John Ragan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. I suggest you consider going there. Very serious tone to today's broadcast. Captain John, you and I are staking our reputations on what we're talking about right here, right now. Do you think either one of us has embellished anything, or do you think this is absolutely the truth and as serious as can be?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm making this presentation on the best information I have available. There's probably secondary and tertiary effects that I don't even know about right now. But there just isn't a way of turning this around, especially with the virus hitting us. If there is ever a vaccine, it's not going to happen soon. And we're already seeing those effects. I don't know if you've been following all the sports figures that are catching the virus. You just can't negotiate with it. You can't make demands. You can't send in the army. And it's going to be nasty for some time. Let me quickly get through these other two articles under financial so we can devote next hour just to the virus. Unemployment going broke. I believe I talked about this back in February when I was talking about some of the impacts coming up. One, that unemployment offices would get overwhelmed because there's more people unemployed than they have people to handle. And the other thing is these programs are designed for normal times, and these are nowhere near normal times. And so far to date, the Texas Workforce Commission has borrowed over $118 million, and they've got interest-free funds through December. Well, the thing is, those funds are going to have to be replenished. Those loans are going to have to be paid back. And guess where that's going to come from? That's going to come from the businesses who if they want to stay in business and have employees, they're going to have to pay that to the TWC. Also, making money out of almost nothing. You've got some lunatic Democrats that believe they can mint a couple of coins made out of platinum. I believe these are 1-ounce coins, and say that they're worth $1 trillion each. Well, platinum spot price is about $818 an ounce. So 2 coins would be worth about $1,600. But their plan is to take these $2 trillion coins, give them to the Fed, and the Fed gives us $2 trillion, and there's no debt. And I don't know if they're crazy enough or evil enough to believe that. The debt we have is so outlandish. We're getting ready, if we haven't already, hit $80 trillion in debt as a nation, public and private. You add in the unfunded liabilities, Social Security, Medicare, pension funds. We're well over $300 trillion that we've taken away from our future. And that's why there is no way this ends well. When you had the Republicans and Democrats both pass that horrendous stimulus bill, that should have told you how serious it is, because you never get those two to agree on anything, especially in that amount of time. We were already in bad shape last fall. The repo market started blowing up, and that's kind of the way the last recession started. And they were better prepared for it this time, but in the tune of trillions of dollars. I expect by the time this is over, you're going to see programs that are in the double-digit trillion. They might even be able to go to the triple-digit trillion before the whole thing blows up in their face. But there's just nowhere to go because we have this fake money from the Federal Reserve, which was created in 1913. And the money is strictly backed by faith. So long as you believe it has value, this raid goes on. As soon as everybody finds out it's backed by nothing, that's when the trouble begins.
Captain John Ragan and I will be back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements, and we'll be talking about the coronavirus, the ensuing corona panic, what it means. And there is a list of links on Captain John Ragan's website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, and you can follow along in class. And my recommendation is that you share this with all the people that you love and like so that they can survive or have a better chance of surviving the corona panic. Distance yourself from the GDP. Captain John Ragan's with us, U.S. Air Force Reserves, retired. We're talking about this hour, the coronavirus and the corona panic. Class, the corona panic is real. The supply chain is broken. Automotive batteries are going dead all over the country. And the reason is people are not driving their cars. So the batteries aren't being recharged. If you want to buy a substandard Chinese manufactured battery charger, you can still buy one on the internet. But if you want to buy a quality USA manufactured battery charger of, let's say, 40 years ago, you will now be seeing them for sale on the internet between 2 and 4x what they cost when they were brand new 40 years ago. Don't believe me? I suggest you go to eBay for yourself and look up used battery chargers. Used automotive battery chargers. You'll see it for yourself. You won't believe how much they cost. A quality battery charger by Xantrex, Xantrex, is selling for as much as $300. The kind I have in our automotive shop. The best in the world. $300. It's crazy. Captain John, back to you.
Well, there's so much. It's sometimes hard to even decide where to begin on this. I do want to mention the name Chris Martenson. I first became aware of him over a decade ago when he put out the Crash Course series. His YouTube channel is Peak Prosperity. And Chris is not an alarmist, but he does believe in preparing and taking action. And in fact, one of the things he's doing is creating a garden, which is one of the best things you can be doing right now. When he first put out an alert back in January that got my attention, and then he started making regular videos. He's now just doing an update twice a week for coronavirus. And in one of those early videos, he talked about masks, which I should also mention that Chris has a PhD in pathology from Duke. That is a medical degree. So, while I could go out and find information on the internet and be able to muddle through the summaries a little bit, I don't have the background to understand what's good information and what's bad information. And this world where the science has been politicized, it's very important to find somebody that can help you wade through that. And he does a great job of explaining the medical side of things. And he also knows what questions should be asked, even if we don't know what the answer is right now. Well, he talked about how when you're in the operating room, they have the surgical team wearing the masks. And they're not doing that because they're afraid of catching something from the patient. When they have the patient open, the insides are sterile. What they're doing is protecting the patient from the staff because they don't want to infect them. And if you're trying not to infect yourself, you're in a critical environment. And of course, if you're working with bioweapons, you really suit up and go to extreme measures. But in our world here, about the best we can do is the N95 or better masks. And that cuts down on what gets through to you and your mouth and nose, which is 2/3 of the mucous membranes on your head that you have to worry about. The one that's not being talked about is the eyes, and I believe that's where a lot of surprise infections come from, because the people that do wear masks, and again, masks somewhat protect you. They're not a great defense for you, but when somebody else talks or sneezes or coughs, all those droplets and aerosols that would have gone into the air, most of those get caught by the mask. So between everybody, getting on the receiving end wearing masks, it greatly cuts down the transmission of this virus. And I didn't include a link for this, but if you can find a site that has the graphs of new cases, the countries that wear masks, you see a track as an inverted V. The cases go up and then they go down. When you see countries that don't do that, like the United States and Russia and Brazil, it goes up and stays there. And if you go to the Johns Hopkins tracking site and you look, and it's almost identical whether you look at the total or the United States, on the linear chart, this thing has never stopped going up. It's at least not going exponential right now. When you go to the log, which measures the exponential growth, we have flattened that out a bit, but it's still on the positive side, which is a negative. And for the world, that hasn't even been flattened quite as much. So that's why masks matter. And the first link there, more than half of COVID cases caught the virus from someone who was not showing any symptoms. And that's one of the big problems we have right now. People think they're just fine. They'll go without masks, and then surprise, surprise, surprise. And that gets into the second link, birthday surprise. This is a story out of North Texas here. Family shaken after 18 relatives test positive for COVID-19 after a surprise birthday party. This started on May 30th when just a single relative who didn't know they were infected attended this birthday party. They in turn infected 7 other family members, and those 7 family members contracted and spread the virus to 10 other relatives. This virus is real. You know, it's worldwide, and I am simply amazed by the people that think, you know, this is just an American thing, it's just a political thing, it's not real. You know, when it comes to the numbers, yeah, it's really hard, even in normal times, to track things accurately. And it's true that we'll never have exact numbers. There's some fatalities that are attributed to coronavirus that aren't. There's some fatalities that are attributed to something that was actually caused by coronavirus. But in general, those are probably going to come fairly close to canceling themselves out. And I also want to make sure that you understand this isn't going to go out and kill everybody. And that's where so much is going on in the discourse. And I probably ought to talk about one of the things Chris talked about in his last video. When you talk about fatality rates, there's 3 different measures. One is the mortality rate. That is the deaths divided by population, and that's going to be a very low number. You have the infection fatality rate. That's the people infected, you know, deaths divided by number of people infected. And that's a medium number. Then there's the case fatality rate. That's the cases, the diagnosed cases. So you take the deaths divided by diagnosed cases, and I'll show you how to see where that's tracking. And it irritates me to no end to see these people try to come up with a mortality rate dividing deaths by population and comparing that to the case fatality rate of flu. You have to compare case fatality rate to case fatality rate. Otherwise, you're measuring apples and horses. It's just ridiculous. And here in America, we are tracking very close to an 11% case fatality rate compared to a 0.1 case fatality rate for the seasonal flu. So when you look at it, that means that this virus is over 100 times more deadly than the seasonal flu. And, you know, that's how serious it is. And I know we're getting ready to head to a break soon. One of the things we're getting to is there's starting to be a little bit more discussion on it, but what hasn't been talked about a lot is what is recovered. Just because you recover from the virus doesn't mean that you're well. And while you might not spread the virus, this virus does some very, very nasty things to the body. And it's like I say, this is not going to be over soon. Last time I put up some wiki articles on the common cold and coronavirus. The coronavirus, the first human one was identified, I believe it was 1965. By the end of the 20th century, they knew of 4 of them, and that's where normalcy went away. This century, we've had 3 more coronaviruses: SARS, MERS, and this virus. And if you go check out Chris Martinson's channel there about a month ago, he had 2 videos that talked about the genetics in this virus. Talks about what a mutation is versus what an insertion is. This virus has code inserted in it, and that makes this virus unlike any other coronavirus. Nothing in the family tree has what was inserted there. That code is entirely new, and that's part of what we're dealing with. And as we look at the risks of getting the virus, one of the things that you'll end up finding is inflammation is a factor. And once you've got the virus and get over it, it has inflammatory effects on the body.
Captain John Ragan, I just want to give you Captain John Ragan, I just want to tell you that I'm experiencing frame loss here on the digital link. I may end up getting knocked off. I've been knocked off many, many times during this broadcast. So please continue without me. Captain John Ragan's with us. Last weekend, President Trump did the dumbest thing that I can think of, given our current infectious environment. He insisted on a campaign rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. As a result, dozens of Secret Service agents are under self-quarantine. 2 tested positive for the corona infection. Captain John, please continue.
Yes, there's nothing more dangerous than being inside with people. The scare of touching surfaces and getting infected, even the CDC made an announcement right before the weekend last month, the holiday weekend, and they said that, while it can happen, that's not the main transmission vector. And, this is a virus, not a bacteria. It can't grow outside the body. And the way you get it primarily is from other people, and you get it from the droplets or aerosols that come out of your mouth. So I think everybody knows about sneezing and coughing, but it's even just talking. You're seeing, like I say, the sports figures, coming down with coronavirus because they're out there, they're working hard, they're breathing hard, and that helps spread the virus, even if they're outside. But, and I had found my article, but I went to the link, and it's no longer on MSN, but in the early days, there was a church up in the Northwest, I forget if it was Washington or Oregon, that had a choir practice. And they practiced social distancing. They did not wear masks for singing. And it turns out, I think it was like a 45-minute rehearsal, and somebody had the virus, and they ended up with double-digit numbers infected, and at the time the article was written, 2 deaths. And still people don't think this stuff is real. So morbidities matter. This isn't going to kill everyone. And this is based on information in Italy. And if you scroll down that article, you'll get to a couple of tables that are kind of ugly. It's kind of hard to make tables look good. So the one I'm looking at is the second table. It compares patients with one or two health conditions versus two or more, or three, more than two, three or more. The fatality rate, if you have three or more conditions, is over 15%. Now, if you don't have any conditions, the fatality rate drops to about 3%. That's still 30 times higher than your seasonal flu, but it's not as bad as 15%. 15%, that's a great percentage if you're playing the lotto, but when it's life or death and your chance of dying is 15%, that's not so good. Imagine going to a stadium and everybody there has three or more conditions, and there's 100,000 people going into the stadium, and only 85,000 come out. That's what we're talking about. I've got a link for the demographics in the U.S., cases and deaths broken down by ethnicity, by age groups, and it's interesting to see that the cases by age group, the bulk of them are the 50 to 64 age group, but the deaths, you can see them start to kind of increase from like 30 to 39 age to the 40 to 49 age. It doubles, but then it really takes off.
Captain John, I'd like to repeat what I mentioned before. I have been knocked off the broadcast sections at a time. So if I am not there, and if you say, if you ask me to respond and I'm not there, it's because I'm not there. So please continue without me. I will do my best to stay connected. Well, you just heard it, bottom of the hour news. AAA says that Americans will hit the roads this summer despite the coronavirus. Those people hitting the roads are the poster children for the spread of the coronavirus. Americans are looking dumber by the second. And the Europeans don't want the Americans traveling to Europe. They're blocking our travel. They're banning our travel. Good for them. They should. Captain John?
I'll make a slight detour here. You know, all the efforts going on to taking people's temperature, it's so ridiculous. And let me break this down for you. Of the people that have the virus, about half are asymptomatic. About 30% have mild symptoms, a mild case, and 20%, those are the ones that are severe enough they need to be hospitalized, and then a smaller fraction of that have to have, ICU type care. Well, of those 20%, based on a report out of China, less than 40% had a fever. So, while fever is a common symptom, not even half the people show that. And I saw another report where those that do have a fever only have a fever for a few days. So you can still have the virus and get over your fever. But those 20% are probably going to be in the hospital. So you're not going to be checking their temperature, out and about anyway. So of those 30% that have mild symptoms, and I don't have a number for this, so I'm just going to say if people that had the more severe problems had less than 40%, let's call it 20% for those. So of those, if you had 100 people with the virus, the 30 in that category, 20% of that is 6 people. And obviously the asymptomatic have no symptoms, including fever. So of those 80 people out and about, only 6 would be having a fever. That works out to 7.5%. Less than 10% of the people would present with a fever. So you're missing more than 90% other people. And like I already covered in that other article, that's where a lot of the spread comes from, because you don't have symptoms. And that's why you have to wear the mask, because you don't even know if you're sick. Let's go to the USCFR. That's the case fatality rate here. You don't have to do any math. It brings it up to date. And once the pandemic is over, the way this is figured is you take the deaths divided by the number of cases. Well, right now, it's not over. So what we have to do is look at the closed cases. And of the closed cases, you have recovered and you have deaths. So the way the math works is the deaths divided by deaths plus discharge, and at the end, that equals total cases. There's a link there on closed cases that says show graph. And way back in March, we were seeing a case fatality rate of over 50%. And then that tracks down. And if you ever had calculus, and calculus 1, you get into limits. But the longer this goes on, the closer that number is going to be to what the final number is. So we're tracking a little under 11%. That doesn't use decimals in this report, so it rounds it up to 11%. But that is what the case fatality rate is. What's really bad, you may already know that COVID damages lungs. And this next article, they have a picture in there that if you didn't know that what you're looking at was a lung, you just couldn't guess it. It's horrible the way it looks. And that's not the half of it. The next link is the one I called recovery. And if we have time, we'll get into here and talk about some of these. Otherwise, I highly recommend you go there and read what's happening to people out there. And this is out of SF Gate, San Francisco. What they don't tell you about surviving COVID-19, recovered doesn't mean healthy again. The next one, it's the inflammation. And what we're seeing with the morbidities, things like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all of these things are inflammatory in nature. And for whatever reason, when you have that inflammatory nature going on in your system, you're more susceptible to severe cases. And some of that depends on the amount of virus you get infected with. And again, this is where masks come into play. If you do get infected, you probably had a smaller amount of virus to begin with, and that gives you a better chance of having a mild case. But what we're seeing is once you've had this virus, especially the severe cases, you are getting damaged by additional inflammation. And the next one has 10 ways coronavirus attacks your body, attacks your brain, your kidneys, your lungs, your heart, your liver, your throat, your toes, your eyes, your skin, and we're also seeing that in children now, your intestines, and that's where your immune system primarily resides. So this virus does a number on many parts of your body. And what's surprising is, we think of this of having started sometime in December in China, and then it came over to the U.S. and also spread other places. Well, it turns out Italy, tests its sewer water, and the sample that they took in Milan and Turin, that they found coronavirus in that, which means that it had already spread to Italy as early as last December. I haven't included it here, but one of the suspicious things back in October, there was an area around that famous lab that for like a week or two, there were no cell phone signals from that area. So, I don't know if we'll ever know the truth, but the suspicion is that's when the incident occurred, and China kept it under wraps until they couldn't keep it under wraps anymore. And then in January, if you were paying attention to the news, the whole world knew. The next article, breathing or talking, may be the most common way coronavirus is spread. Besides droplets, you have aerosolization. I saw 3 reports from different universities. Those were not peer-reviewed at the time, confirming that. Since then, there's been another one from a different university that has been peer-reviewed. So it is known that this virus spreads by aerosol. It's not the only one that does that, but it's confirmed, but that hasn't hit the mainstream yet. And this gets into the worst place that you can go in public, and that is a bathroom. You have an enclosed area. It's already been shown that the virus is in the stool because when you get below the belt, you have mucous membranes down there from whatever holes you have. I have not seen any confirmation that it's in the urine, but it could be. But in the poo, it's definitely there. And when you flush, especially in public restrooms where you can't put a lid down, it aerosolizes that and will stick in the air for at least a few minutes, 10, 20, maybe even 30. And if somebody has diarrhea, it probably even spreads more into the air. So to go into a restroom, number one, you need a good mask. If you have an N95, that's great. Otherwise, you look at my post from last time. It tells you how to create a mask out of the blue shop towels, which are on par with an N95. But that's not everything. You also have to have eye protection because those are mucous membranes, and that's ways a lot of doctors believe they've become infected because they weren't wearing eye protection. And that virus hits your eye, and if it's enough, you end up getting a case. So you either have to have some kind of goggles or face shield if you want to go into these places and be safe. And that's, to me, the biggest part that they have not discussed yet. They are getting around to saying, yeah, we got to have the masks, but that only takes care of your nose and mouth. You got to protect your eyes as well. The last link is a plan, and from what I can tell, this looks to be a valid PDF. It's the response plan for the federal government dated back in March. It's over 100 pages long. I just found this yesterday. I have not had time to read it. From what I can tell, it appears genuine. And if you're interested in that type of thing, you have the ability to read that document there through that link. And Vincent, did you want to comment there before we can get back to that recovery tab?
Yeah, I have a couple quick comments. So, class, if you go to Sam's Club or Walmart as an example, and you use one of their toilets, the aerosolation of whatever you flush will reach the sink 15 to 20 feet away, easily. The whole room is filled with pee and poop, aerosolized. There's no escape. Stay out of the bathrooms. I have one other short comment, John, when we come back. It's what do we do about it? So here's what I believe is our forecast. So, Captain John, correct me if I'm speaking for you improperly, but I believe our forecast is this. As more and more people become infected, they'll be out of work. With more people out of work, more bills won't be paid, which will result in more and more people being out of work. The supply chain will continue to fail. So what do? Get food, water supplies, and defense tools while you still can. Grow your garden, can your food, learn how to do it. Everything is breaking. The insurance, banking, and service industries will continue to collapse. That's it in a nutshell. Your comments?
Yeah, and keep in mind, these are the people that get the serious cases. They spend weeks or months in the hospital. You can imagine what those bills are like, just to add insult to injury. Let me
please continue, Captain John Ragan.
We don't have a lot of time. I do want to read one of the quotes here out of that SF Gate article. I'm currently in the hospital after having a heart attack caused by clotting that resulted from COVID-19. I have a stent in my heart and need to wear a heart monitoring vest at all times. Now I face months of recovery, including physical and occupational therapy. I'm only 29. These are life-changing. Another person went into acute kidney failure, need dialysis, got skin problems, abnormal heart rhythm, people losing control of their movements, both bowel and bladder. I'm just getting over a mild case after over 2 months. There's scarring in my lower right lung, and my stomach and digestion are a mess like never before. But I'm coughing way less and can take walks again. And by the way, this is the 3rd time in 2 months I've gotten better. I'm just hoping it's the last and doesn't all come back again. And I do want to go back to the Wikipedia articles on the common cold. There's 3 different virus groups, of which COVID is, coronavirus is one of them. And you look at that, and I'll ask some questions here. Because we're talking about, one of their plans is to have herd immunity, which would take 70 to 80% of the population being infected. Well, how much of the population has had a common cold? When is that herd immunity going to kick in? The first coronavirus was identified in the 1960s, like I said. To date, there has never been a safe and effective vaccine for a coronavirus. While there could be a first time, there's a good chance that there will never be a vaccine for coronavirus. And in the video I have down there from that Chris put out last night, he talks about a new mutation to the coronavirus that makes the virus more flexible, which may make it even more infective. So you can pretend it's not real. I highly encourage you go back at least a week or two and watch Chris's videos. I've also watched John Campbell, who has a medical degree, a retired nurse teacher in the UK. He gets into a lot of what's going on in various countries. I've also occasionally watched some of the videos from the MedCram channel. And that's a young doctor working at a hospital here in the U.S., and he does directly treat coronavirus patients. So if you want an education, want to stay up to date, and at least watch Chris's videos. That's the best information that I've found out there, if you can only pick one. And there's only so much we can do. If you have these conditions, a lot of these conditions can be corrected, but it can take months. Supplement-wise, vitamin D, having sufficient levels appears to help. But if you don't have your levels up by the time you catch the virus, that doesn't help you. And you should be taking, vitamin C, divided doses during the day.
Captain John, I want to thank you so much for spending 2 hours with us, doing all the research beforehand. And if your schedule permits, I'd like you to come back whenever you can and tell us what we need to do, in your opinion, to come out the other side of this as a survivor. Captain John, as we said, this would wipe the smiles off the faces of our class, and it did. Thank you, my friend.